Hi there, I'm Claudia. Today we're going to look at the pros and cons of Jupyter Notebooks as a software development environment. Now, if you're learning to program for the first time, especially if you're picking up Python right now, you've probably already run into Jupyter Notebooks and you've probably already been wowed by how easy it is to get started, how simple the interface is, how everything is visual and easy to understand. So you'd be forgiven if you were to think that, we're done. We don't need other software development environments because Jupyter Notebook is all that. But Jupyter Notebook is still just one choice, one option of the myriad development environments that we have at our disposal for writing code. And yes, Jupyter Notebooks are pretty great at what they do. And for some use cases, which we'll talk about later on in this video, they are the absolute hands-down best choice. And in fact, they were created specifically for those use cases. But still, that does not mean that they are the best choice of development environment for each and every software development project out there. In fact, there are some use cases out there for which Jupyter Notebooks is pretty terrible as a choice for a development environment. So in this video, we're going to look at what those use cases are, why Jupyter Notebook is such a bad choice in those scenarios, and what other choices do we have that will make for a better experience when writing code for those use cases. And of course, like I said, we will also look at those tasks where Jupyter Notebook really shines. So the things that it was really created for, and we'll see what makes Jupyter Notebook so well suited for those tasks too. For more in-depth tutorials like this one, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. And also, while you're at it, don't forget to hit the bell button so you're the first to know when the next video comes out. All right, let's dive in. Is Jupyter the ultimate code environment? After the last few videos where we've discussed the benefits of using Jupyter Notebook for writing Python code, you might be reasonably wondering whether or not Jupyter Notebook is really the best thing for writing code in general, and whether it is the ideal environment for writing code no matter what your end goal is. If you're just starting out and you're just learning Python for the first time, perhaps you're considering the various things you can do with it, you might be wondering right now, should I just ditch my code editor? Should I ditch my IDE in favor of Jupyter Notebook and just use that? And the answer to that question is, unfortunately, it depends. It depends on what you are building. It depends on your use case, on what you want to be doing with Python, and you're going to want to choose a coding environment that really lends itself well to that goal. For the rest of this video, we're going to look at a few applications, a few use cases where Jupyter Notebook is not the best environment to be using, and we're also going to look at a few applications that Jupyter Notebook is really the perfect environment to be using when writing Python code. Let's first talk about those situations where Jupyter Notebook is not the best choice for a programming environment. The first situation where Jupyter Notebooks might not be the best thing to use when writing code is that where you want to be writing complex programs which involve multiple files. If you're building an application, for example, that involves, let's say a few different files, and each of those files have their own dependencies, and you need to keep things separate and neat for the purposes of architecting said application or said project, then you're not going to have a very good time doing that in Jupyter Notebook. If you want to keep things in separate files, sure, you could create different Jupyter Notebooks, but that's really not what the application is made for. Jupyter Notebook is not particularly good at organizing or managing files for you, and it really doesn't work well as an IDE for projects that involve multiple different files, each with their own dependencies. For those situations, you're better off using an IDE or just a good old-fashioned text editor where you can create multiple files and you can save them separately and use them however you want. That way, you're going to be able to structure your project in a way that is going to make a lot more sense for you right now and later on when you're going to go back to it and revisit it to maintain your code. The second scenario where Jupyter Notebooks might not be the best environment for you to use is that where you are writing a complex program that needs to be run in one single piece, as opposed to several different scripts that you can run piecemeal. If you're writing a complex application or just a more complex project that involves a lot more Python code than just a line or two here or a short script here and there, and if you need to run said project in one piece, then you're not going to have a particularly easy time of doing that in Jupyter. The user interface of Jupyter Notebooks is not designed for running a very large script in one go. In that case too, you're better off using a good old-fashioned text editor, something like Sublime or Atom or Visual Studio Basic, and writing out your project either in one file, if that makes sense for your project architecture, or multiple files, and designing it in a more sustainable fashion so that you can go back and revisit different pieces as you need to. The third situation where Jupyter Notebook is not the best environment to be writing code in is if you prefer your code to be separate from your output. Jupyter Notebook as an interface was designed to show you both the code and the output of that code in the same place. That is just what it's best at. It does a great job of doing that. The input cell and output immediately below the cell kind of format in Jupyter Notebook is the best thing about it, and it works great for those workflows that it was designed for. But if you would prefer to not have your output tied in with your input, then Jupyter Notebook is not the right environment for your particular use case. Why might you want to keep your input separate from your output, or to keep your code separate from the output of your code? Well, honestly, there are a ton of different reasons why you would want to do that. And the simplest of that is just that, it could be confusing, right? Maybe you want to easily be able to see where your input is and where your output is. Maybe you just don't want to be seeing output for intermediate steps in your project. So in those cases, you might be better off skipping Jupyter Notebook and instead, again, going back and finding a suitable text editor or some other IDE that you're comfortable using and setting up your project in that environment instead. Now that we've talked about all the situations that Jupyter Notebook is not the best for, let's go ahead and look at those applications for which Jupyter Notebook is the absolute hands-down ideal environment for writing Python code. The first such scenario is any sort of data manipulation or data analysis. If you work with data that is in, CSV format or Excel format or TSV, pipe delimited, whatever it is, or even, JSON data, XML data, whatever kind of data you have, chances are that you're first going to need to clean up said data, and then you're going to need to manipulate it and bring it in a certain format that you can go ahead and analyze it, right? You're going to want to perhaps build visualizations on top of it. You're going to want to aggregate it so that you can produce a report that is easily understood by somebody who is not familiar with the data. Any sort of use case that requires you to do data analysis is perfect for using Jupyter Notebook. And this is really what the Notebook interface was designed to be best at. Let's look at some of the ways in which Jupyter Notebook is better than a traditional text editor for working with data and for producing data analysis. The first thing you're going to want to do is to easily import the data. Depending on the format that your data is in, you're probably going to have to do some troubleshooting. Raise your hand if you've ever tried to import a data file and you've run into a formatting error, or the result that you're getting is not exactly what you're expecting. That happens. It happens a lot, and you need to be prepared for that. The beautiful thing about Jupyter Notebook is that you're going to get that error exactly where it makes most sense for it to be. You're going to get it immediately underneath the line of code where you are importing that data. So by seeing that error exactly there, you're going to have a much easier time understanding what is going on. Why did that import fail? Why are you not able to read the data? Or better yet, okay, you read the data, you were able to import it, and you perhaps created a data frame, but something is off, right? What is going on? Perhaps one of your columns is not formatted the way you expected it, if it's tabular data. Perhaps one of your JSON fields is not what you expected it to be. All of a sudden, now you're able to see those things visually, and you're able to visually dig into the data and look into different data points to see whether the error is consistent, whether, the formatting error just happens in some data points or it happens everywhere. You have a ton more options, and you can see them a lot faster before you actually write the entirety of your data analysis. So you can already see and troubleshoot all of those data integrity problems as soon as you read in your data. After you've cleaned up your data, the next step is probably going to be some form of exploratory analysis where you're going to want to aggregate different data fields. You're going to want to check for data integrity to see what you're missing, where you're missing it. And there too, Jupyter Notebook is perfect because the interface of input and output of writing a line of code and immediately underneath seeing the output is really ideal for that kind of scenario. Jupyter Notebook combined with tools like Pandas, for example, will give you a very nice and easy workflow for doing those kinds of aggregations and that kind of exploration. Using Pandas, you're going to be able to do fairly complex data aggregations by just writing 1 or 2 lines of code. And the benefit of the Jupyter Notebook interface is that you are immediately going to be able to get visual feedback for how your aggregation turned out, for how your code is working. If you accidentally misinterpreted the data, for example, in an aggregation, you're going to be able to see that instantaneously. It's going to be immediately obvious because you get the output immediately underneath the code that you wrote. Same for data visualizations. Chances are you're going to want to produce, perhaps some line graphs, some bar graphs, some histograms. You're going to want to see the frequency of your data. If that happens, you will be able to simply write the code for the visualization that you want, and immediately underneath, you will get the rendering of that visualization. It won't pop up in a different window. It will be immediately in line underneath your code, and you will be able to tweak it very easily. You'll be able to change things like colors and marker shapes and sizes, edit the entire canvas of the visualization very easily while getting immediate visual feedback. That's a pretty neat feature in my opinion. Another great use case for Jupyter Notebooks is data science and machine learning work. Machine learning model prototyping is a task that lends itself very, very well to Jupyter Notebooks. When prototyping a machine learning model, there is going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of tweaking, a lot of understanding how the model interacts with the data and how you can tweak it such that the model outputs represent your data more accurately. While doing that, Jupyter Notebook offers the perfect interface because you are able to tweak parameters very easily and you are able to see the outputs of that right away. You're able to easily calculate performance metrics from particular models by using the built-in tools that packages like scikit-learn offer, for instance. And also you can use direct out-of-the-box modeling techniques, which you can apply right away to your dataset without needing to build a model from scratch. When you're just in the first stages of prototyping a machine learning model for a specific application, those kinds of features and the ability to see visual feedback of your work and see what's happening in the black box that is often a machine learning model, then the interface of Jupyter Notebooks is the ideal one for that. Finally, data science work in general lends itself really well to the Jupyter Notebook interface. Jupyter Notebook, and before Jupyter Notebook, IPython notebooks were created specifically for data scientists and data science work. The data science process itself is by definition one of trial and error. In data science, you will usually start with a question or a problem or the need for an application. And from there, we move on to understanding how we can answer that question or how we can solve that problem. Once you've identified the data that you need, you're going to have to, of course, figure out whether that data is all you need or whether you need something else. So the process itself involves a lot of trial and error, right? You're going to need to read multiple data sets, to get data from multiple sources, to poke around in those data sets to see what you can learn from them, whether they're sufficient to answer your question or whether you need something else. What else might you need? What can you actually learn from those data sets, right? What parts of your question or what parts of your problem can those data sets help you answer? You are oftentimes doing that piecemeal. It is very rare when a data scientist gets the entirety of the data that they need to answer a specific question or to build a solution all in one go. It's usually a piecemeal process, one that involves digging and poking and prodding and making different data sets work together and making different data sources be compatible, so on and so forth. Even when all of this work has been completed, when all is said and done, and the question was answered, the analysis was produced, the machine learning model was tuned, and it's producing wonderful outputs, what's the next thing that needs to happen? The data scientist now has to go and communicate results and set findings to their manager, to their executives. In that situation, too, Jupyter Notebook is perfect. Why? Because all of a sudden, in one single page, we can see the entire body of the data scientist's work. We can see her code, we can see the outputs, we can see the data that went into producing those outputs. We can even tweak things in real time if we want to change a parameter or if we want to exclude certain data and see how the rest of the analysis performs and what the output is. All of that is possible because everything is in one place. The code, the input, the data, and the output is all in one place in an easily digestible format. What is more, Jupyter Notebook even offers a number of very, very useful integrations, such as the Rise.js integration, which allows for creating slides on top of a Jupyter Notebook. The way Rise.js works is that it allows you to select different cells and their outputs and combine them into slides that look a lot like the typical PowerPoint slides that you are probably very familiar with. Not only can you then show your work and your outputs in the format of a slideshow, which your manager and their manager is going to understand very easily, very likely, but you are also actually able to run code in those slides. How cool is that? Here you have a slideshow that looks a lot like a PowerPoint slideshow, and you can actually run code and see results at the same time. If that isn't going to impress your manager and your manager's manager, I don't know what will. So there you have it. To sum up, Jupyter Notebook as an environment is best suited for certain types of tasks. Those tasks include importing data, cleaning data, doing data analysis, rendering visualizations, prototyping machine learning models, and overall managing the data science workflow, especially in the prototyping and experiment phase. Some use cases for which Jupyter Notebook is not the most ideal programming environment include things like complex programs, which require multiple files. So programs and applications where you want to keep different parts of the application in different files, such as to better manage architecture and dependencies. Complex programs that need to be run in one piece as opposed to piecemeal. So applications that you create that you want to run in a single piece as opposed to independent small scripts. And finally, Jupyter Notebook is also not the best choice for people who would prefer to have their inputs separate from their outputs. So for those who prefer to not have their code commingled with the outputs of that code. Some people might find that confusing. It might not be the best, cleanest presentation of the code. It might not make it particularly easy to work with the code for some situations. So in those cases, just like in the previous two, it's best to stick to a traditional text editor. All right, that's it for today. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and hit that notification button while you're at it too, so you don't miss any of the new videos that are coming up soon. If you want even more in-depth tutorials on Python and the latest AI technologies, also feel free to check our blog at edlitera.com/blog, and that link is also going to be included in the description. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.